As Andrew said, my name's Mark Donaldson and I'm one of his colleagues from SGS. I was responsible for basically doing all of the calculations behind the numbers in the report. And what I'm going to take you through today is, as part of the process, we provided a tool that all of the library managers can use to actually place a value on their specific library service. To use for advocating, and I'm just going to take you through, I guess. Andrew spoke about the principles behind our modelling techniques, and I'm just going to take you through, I guess, the background to each of those techniques and how that fed into the use of this calculator and how it works. I'll take you through a tour of the actual calculator at the end of the presentation, but it's a fairly simple model to use. I mean, it only requires two selections, your specific service and a case study to benchmark it against. But I guess what I'm trying to provide here is provide you with the confidence that behind those selections there's a lot of detail that I guess produces those results. So as Andrew said, there was two valuation elements that we looked at: the cost-benefit analysis and the economic impact analysis. I'll take you through the cost-benefit analysis first and how we sort of went about assessing that. As Andrew said, the benefits from a CBA perspective were your direct user and indirect user benefits, as well as your non-use benefits. And we had three techniques for valuing that: the travel cost method, the financial savings method, and the contingent valuation method. Now, each of these methods were calculated, obviously, using a different process. The travel cost method is something we deduce from your behaviour. So the choices we make, show how much we value, a particular service. And through that, we asked a number of questions in the survey to try and draw out what that value was, or that intrinsic value that people place on their libraries, just through their behaviour. So how far was it to travel to your library? How many different places do you access on a visit to the library? What are your out-of-pocket travel costs for a typical trip to the library? How do you travel to the library, and how long do you spend in the library? So we all place value on our time, and choosing to spend that time at a library means we derive value from that service. The second method we used was the financial savings. This is a pretty easy one to understand. Use of that library service saves us money. I mean, if we had to procure that service from the private market, it would cost us. So this was a method to try and work out how much was saved. And simply we asked the question in the case study surveys, thinking about your typical library usage over the past 12 months, what do you estimate it would have cost you if you had to pay for the services from a private business? The third method was the contingent valuation method. As Andrew said, it's deducing from the amount you would be willing to spend to access the service were it not free. So were it not a public service, how much would you be willing to spend to have that service available? And simply we looked at it from both the user and non-user perspective. Both surveys asked the same question, thinking from broader community perspective: if the public library was not funded by the government, how much would you be willing to pay to maintain the community's access to the current services? So those are the three methods we used, and that's basically how we drew out those values to apply to each of, as Andrew said, each of the cost structures and population and membership numbers from each of the library services. The economic impact analysis basically we had the recurrent costs of operations and capital expenditure for each of the library services, but we also were informed from the user survey of what use of the library triggered in user expenditures. And we fed that into our local econometric model that Andrew took you through to get the local employment value added, which can be considered as a contribution to your gross regional product, and local output or economic activity. So the local econometric model that we use, it was scaled down from the Australian National Accounts input-output tables, and we manipulated those using population and employment numbers to generate a regional table for every library service in Queensland. And we then perform manipulation on those tables to get these multipliers, which basically tell us how much a dollar invested in a library is going to flow through that economy and what value it's going to create in terms of your output, employment and value added. So we had the 7 case studies, and as Andrew said, these were chosen to represent a segment population. And basically what we knew for each of the library services in Queensland, well, we had the recurrent costs of operations, the population, membership, visitation numbers, and we had economic multipliers that we calculated from our own model. And from the case studies, we drew out the library user willingness to pay and the non-user willingness to pay, so that contingent valuation, the financial savings, and time spent at the library and travelling to the library, and the cost of travelling to the library, the travel cost method, and also our triggered purchases. So each of those was provided for the case studies, and they provided those benchmarks that we could then apply to each of the library services in Queensland. So you'll see that under each of the case study libraries, we allocated each of the library services, and each of those services was benchmarked against that given case study. So the library valuation calculator, as I said, it's pretty simple to use. There's 2 choices to be selected when you open it up, and there's only 2 screens visible to you, the input and the output screen. So the input, simply you have to choose your library service and also your preferred case study library. Now, we allocated each of the library services to a case study, but I guess library managers would have a better understanding or might disagree with how we've allocated their library and what they think their user base would reflect in terms of their willingness to pay, etc. So they can choose which case study library to benchmark their library against, and basically the output page will pop up, and we'll have all of the outputs from both that cost-benefit perspective and from the economic impact perspective. So I'll take you through the model now, if I can get it up here. At the beginning, you'll see there's also a page. It just has drawn out a few of the basically the instructions for using the model. We have our input page, and I'll run you through an example here using, for instance, Brisbane as the we'll use the Gold Coast as an example, and Brisbane as its case study library to benchmark against. And basically our output then shows the results for that library benchmarked against Brisbane. So, it shows here from the cost-benefit perspective that, a cost of running that library, and that's straight from the statistical bulletin of 30 million, and the benefit seen in the Gold Coast community, estimated user and non-user benefits totaling 74 million, and a benefit cost ratio there of 2.4 or a net benefit of 44 million. And you'll also see the economic impact results below, showing both the impact to the local economy, so the local economy would be the municipality, so the Gold Coast local government, and also the impact of that specific library service on its own to the wider Queensland economy. So, from an output perspective, $55 million from the costs of operating and also those triggered user expenditures, and a value added of 29 million, and employment of 270. So it's a pretty easy model to use, and what I wanted to do was to just quickly show you that underneath it all there is a great level of detail. So basically all of our information is in here. So all of that base level information that we know, the members, the users, the population served for each of the libraries, and each of the benchmarked, such as the user willingness to pay, non-user willingness to pay levels, which are then allocated depending on your choice. So all of those values are sitting in there behind the model, and I believe it is locked, just so that those can't be changed. But it's all there in behind it. It's a very simple process to use, and I guess the idea was to give you the confidence that behind all of these figures are some really robust analysis. So that's the Library Valuation Calculator, and as Andrew said, that's available on the Public Libraries Connect website, I think under Maintaining Your Library, championing your library, so you can all find it there. Yeah, of course. Yeah, under each of the, right at the end of the model, there's also just some selected testimonial from Queensland resident users and non-users, and basically separated into certain categories, just so, along with those results, you can draw out some of those qualitative comments from users and non-users of how they value that library and what it means to them. So that's all I had to present on. If there are any questions, please feel free for both Andrew or I to answer. Yeah, thank you. Pardon, sorry? As a technical question, what version of Excel? Yeah, so depending on what version of Excel your library service uses, we provided both the 2003 and 2007 version, so both should work, depending on what version you've got there.
I just have a few concerns about the financial savings question, in that it does give rigorous results, because it was a very, very vague question. I know that if I, as a hunter, had been asked it, I would just have got to figure in the year. I wouldn't actually have thought, okay, well, I borrow 20 books a year, and they cost $20 each, and oh yes, my child goes to story time, and that might cost me $5, and oh yes, I do use the meeting room, and that would cost me such and such. I would just have said, probably maybe 200, and put that in. I just have a feeling that it may be underestimated.
Well, it is one single question that Mark did show, but in terms of the flow of the survey, we open up the survey by saying, are you a library member? How often do you go to the library? What do you do when you're at the library? So all that context is built before that question, which is, I think, as best as you can do. Yes, there is, to answer the question, there is some speculation required, and I guess when you're doing market research, you have to weigh up. You want people to respond to the question, so you want it easy for them to respond. But the cost of that is, well, how much working are they going to do to actually provide a response?
And I think it was, well, from the results, you'll see that the financial savings method, in terms of undervaluing the results, well, it was one of the ones to consistently show a greater than quite greater than 1 benefit cost ratio. Yes.
Did you have a look at customers who are only interacting online, who are not physically coming to the library, who are downloading e-books, using online databases? Was that factored in, or would you do that in the future as more and more people only engage online?
Yeah. Well, I don't think that was captured in this analysis, simply because it's difficult to ascertain how many times people access a service remotely. So as I think Jeanette mentioned at the beginning, those are definitely areas, you know, we can look at trying to place a value, but this was I guess looking at it from the physical place perspective, and the value that it placed there.
So a number of case studies had different approaches to gathering the data. For example, the Sunshine Coast had a very, probably others, but this is the one that I recall, had a very strong email base. So they emailed their members, so the people didn't actually have to come into the library. But the way that the questionnaire is written, it is focusing on when they come to use the library services. So I think, I can't remember if I said that, I think there are a number of things that weren't, that possibly cause their estimates to be underestimates of the value. One is the online, one is the fact that we didn't ask kids, we only asked adults, and kids may not be as informed as consumers, but they definitely get some benefit from libraries. I can speak from personal experience. I can remember. And we also didn't capture, well, I don't think we really adequately captured the environmental savings of reusing resources over and over again by different users. Anybody else?
We've got a number of users who register but can use the databases online and all of our services online because we have a great website. So yeah, that seems to be a massive gap that you've missed a lot of people. I mean, we weren't in the survey, but a lot of libraries would have that. So yeah, I think that would be good to capture.
Well, the only way is up for the benefit cost ratio.
So I mean, it's a conservative, I guess you could say it's a conservative look at the value, but it's still showing strong return on that investment.
One of the key issues with the online component is that we haven't come to an agreement of how we all measure that. And so I think that has to come first so that you're comparing apples with apples of the 7 case study libraries. And I can say that 2 didn't have a website, so at the time that we measured it, so to ensure that we were, sort of costing the same, that was an issue. But we are doing some work with ABS on really trying to refine what those online measures are and how we can all count them accurately so that we're all counting the same thing. So we're doing that now.
Any other questions? Because I see we're eating into lunchtime. No? Well, if any of you have any questions or indeed would like to commission SGS to do more work, just remember the name SGS Economics and Planning. We'd be happy to help. And certainly, don't be, as you see, this tool is very easy and the text beside it explains what it all means, and I've written it in a very layman's approach, so you should effectively be able to cut and paste from there and just dump it into a document and you can use it immediately for your own advocacy efforts. Thank you, and thank you to the State Library and the Library Board of Queensland. Thank you.